Morning, everybody. I'm Justine Drake. I'm the content director of John Brown Media. And my guest today is a very, very fabulous chap. His name is Andre Nel. And your title, Andre, is?
General Manager, Sustainability for Pick n Pay.
Well, there we go.
Great to be with you this morning.
It's fab. Thank you. I suppose the clue's in the title, sustainability, right? Which is clearly what we're discussing today. I think we should perhaps kick off Pick n Pay being a supermarket. I know there's many areas that you deal with within the sustainability realm, but I think we're going to go with a food topic because it's close to my heart, and we're going to just want to know what is your stance and how are you communicating that to customers, and what are you doing linked to food waste, because it's a massive problem within the supermarket industry.
Yeah, definitely. So maybe just some quick background on sustainability at Pick n Pay. So we've high level got three areas. So we've got a lot of work happening in terms of changing the food system, which is what we're talking about today. Then we've got a component around using less. So we're able to share more, less energy, less packaging, less waste, less. And if you have less, then you've got more to give. And then the last area is the support for communities and our employees. So in terms of food and food retailers, obviously food waste is a huge concern for all retailers, essentially because it's part of your bottom line. It's money just being wasted. So just from a financial point, it doesn't make any sense. Of course, addressing it is less easy because it's such a complex thing, because it starts from the farms where food is unfortunately wasted. It might not be the right spec. The cold chain, getting it to it gets processed, more losses, food losses in the store because of wrong dates, or people not packing it onto the shelf or off the shelf in time. And then the last with the consumers, obviously at your home, you end up unfortunately wasting some food as well. So that's why it's so tricky to just reduce food waste. And it's a pain in our country because it's such a sad thing with millions and millions of people going to bed hungry every night. So for all the retailers in South Africa, it's a big issue that we're all working on. We've got two big programs. The one is called 10-20-30. And that's we're the only South African retailer in that initiative. And that's basically 10 retailers across the world. And then you work with your 20 biggest suppliers. And together in each of your supply chains, you reduce food waste with 30% by 2030. So it's 10 retailers, 20 suppliers, 50% by 2030. And that's how we get to the 10-20-30.
And where did that originate?
It's an international initiative it's called the CEO Initiatives, and it's linked to the WRI, the World Resource Institute as well. Right. So that's sort of the international one. And then locally, the Consumer Goods Council of South Africa has also done stellar work. They launched the Food Loss and Waste Agreement. And how it practically works for companies, that's part of it. So if you're part of 10-20-30, you get all the international learning, you get exposure. And then locally, you do the work and the reporting happens essentially in the format that the CGCSA helps companies to do. So it's a lot of work on collaboration, because we can't just fix it one company on its own.
No, but so what I'm quite interested in, because obviously we all care about this and we talk about it at a certain level, but within the South African context, how much do your consumers care? I mean, how do you know that they care? Obviously they've got to sort of, you vote with your purse. Do people, knowing that we are suffering, there's a lot of people who can't eat at all, never mind food waste, and a lot of those people shop at Pick n Pay. So what has been the feedback or the demands or whatever from your South African consumer? Do they care?
They do care. I mean, and they care for different reasons. What you alluded to. I mean, some of the more affluent people are aware of it for the environmental impact. Our kids are saying, what are you doing to make the world better for us? And then there's people that care because they don't have food, which makes our country so interesting and scary to work in at the same time. So the awareness is certainly there. We also see it in people that are, so if you're in a store, you might see, sell the product that's reached its sell-by date, but not the use-by date, at a cheaper price. So we call it reduce to clears. All the retailers call it different things. So
Yes.
customers, there's a demand for that. And then the food that doesn't get sold, we donate huge amounts to Food Forward SA to again get it to the people that that can't afford to even do that bit of shopping. And then we've also launched Feed the Nation at the start of the lockdowns last year. Essentially, that is just to get to food to people in need. I mean, one of the focus areas is like children. There's so many child-headed households in South Africa. It's something like 140, 150,000 families where the kid is, the parent. So we've supported about 15,000 families like that to
So
date.
Feed the Nation.
Um,
Great.
yeah, I mean, so they get a food hamper for the family that lasts them 4 to 6 weeks. We've distributed 33 million meals to date, which just shows you the need.
Yeah.
And it's not Pick n Pay that's done it. It's not Feed the Nation. It's collaboration. So we've raised 150 million rand to date, all through people wanting to give and knowing about the need in the country.
That's your
So
genuine shoppers, right, Andre? I mean, I know I give my 21 Rand or whatever it is.
exactly.
Every time I pay a bill, I add that on, and hopefully something wonderful happens with it. So that money and those hampers have come directly from your consumers.
Yeah, it's from consumers, it's from other foundations, from big, most of the big companies in the country has actually contributed lots of corporate awareness around it in terms of food waste and then for food. Obviously, there's the human component to it, but there's also the financial component to it, because if people are hungry, it leads to social
So okay, so food.
instability.
Yeah, food waste, you are working on multiple levels. I mean, there's some things you can do, and obviously some things you can't control about my food waste at home. But what you possibly can control more of is uh, general waste like packaging and plastic and all those hideous things. So, what are you doing about that? Knowing there are other supermarkets in South Africa, no names, no pactual, who package everything within an inch of its life, and it does look absolutely beautiful, and its shelf life is obviously much longer because of all these things. But the planet is, not very thankful for that. So what's your
Mm.
stance on the packaging scenario?
I mean, you understand, I mean, we do need packaging on some lines because we need to transport it. It needs to get to the store safely. It needs to be food safe when we take it home. And it needs to last in the fridge or on the shelf or wherever it might be. But certainly that there's too much packaging in the world is also true. So we're part of the South African Plastic Pact, and that's got commitments for companies for 2025. So again, it's the industry or the country that's shifting, which is really awesome. So some of the commitments that we've made there is that by 2025, all the packaging should be either reusable, so you can buy something and reuse it for something else, or it needs to be recyclable. We've said we'll reduce our and also increase the recycled content. So you buy packaging, but it's got lots of recycled content in it, for example.
Yeah.
Not a sort of packaging is like plastic bags, our blue plastic bags. Like we use about 6,000 tons of discarded plastic every year into the bags. So if we didn't have a recycled bag, where would that plastic have gone? Probably nowhere. So increasing recycling levels, and then also the weight of the packaging. Obviously, there's a financial component to that. So because you're using less packaging, so it makes financial sense. If it's lighter, it's cheaper because you have to move less volume, and you're using less packaging. And then also switching to the way that we design packaging in terms of what materials you select. Can it easily be recycled? And it's quite complex because you've got so many materials, and you might have a bottle that's recyclable, and then they put a cap on it that isn't recyclable, and a
Yes,
label on it that isn't. Then you just want to pull out your hair.
I
So
do.
that's work that's work that's happening now. And then other one that's really, I mean, so consumers might not be very aware of that. They don't see it. They just see some of the things changing. The other project is called On-Pack Recycling Logos, and that's across all the retailers where we're working towards standardizing labels to make it simple, because no one understands the 7 and the 6 is, it's like a secret code. It's only the recyclers that actually know what they are. And these new labels are pretty much just going to tell you this: you can recycle it or you can't recycle it.
That would be
Just to make it easier. And from government side, which is very encouraging, they've recently gazetted the EPR scheme or EPR program in South Africa. There's many of them across the world, and that's an extended producer responsibility program. So if you're the brand owner, Pick n Pay, No Name, or Coke, or Tiger Brands, or whatever, and your name is on that product, you're the producer, and that means you've got now the responsibility to ensure that it should be recycled. And the approach on that is that there will be levies on the amount of packaging that you use, and that money that then gets collected is used then to increase recycling infrastructure, so that there is capacity to recycle all these products that we've got on the market.
This is a
So
global.
yeah, it's different schemes in different countries, but with the sort of same aim. And the good thing again, obviously you don't want to spend more money, but the moment you link a levy to something, people realize there's value in it. So the collectors become more aware of it, and companies become more aware of it because you're paying. So you obviously want to use less packaging, and you want to use the right packaging so that you don't have this extra expense in terms of packaging. But it's a really good thing for South Africa, because it forces companies to pay attention to what they're putting into the market, because they're going to be paying for every little punnet or every little bottle that they put out.
I like that a lot. So that brings me, so if we think about packaging and food waste, and we put that together, the one thing that comes to mind is obviously fruit and vegetables without packaging. And then you alluded to it earlier, the notion of ugly vegetables, which I love. So I'm sure you know that the initiative, I think it started with Whole Foods in the States, as far as I remember, and then a supermarket in France, where the less than perfect vegetables, the funny twisted carrot and the, I don't know, ding tomato or whatever, were sold at cheaper prices, and people were encouraged to buy these ugly vegetables. Do you think that there's a place for ugly vegetables in the South African market, or we just want to go and buy the pristine tomato and the perfect banana?
No, I think there's a place for less perfect. We've done in some of our stores, we've got big areas that hasn't got packaging, where you can measure out the coffee or the whatever you want to purchase. Sadly, with COVID, people are so aware of, did anyone touch anything, that, those are a little bit challenging areas. But in terms of less perfect or imperfect fruit and veg, we've got lines specifically for them, because we're able to sell, obviously they're able to be sold at the lower price than the perfect product or the perfect looking apple.
Yeah.
So we do have them in our stores, and it's linked to that is also nice programs that's starting in the country in terms of one, for example, is something that McCain is running in terms of sweet potatoes, so that the waste from the sweet potatoes are not the waste, the some of the waste and the not perfect ones that they can't use, you can use in other things. So they're starting to use them in breads, for example. So it's got super nutritional values, and you're able to sell the bread at the same price as a standard bread. But for kids, it's more healthy potentially, because the nutritional levels are better. So it's also looking at the waste that we generate in fruit and veg or other areas. Is it actually waste? Is there something else that we can do with that product?
So sort of
That's
reuse.
becoming more and more important.
Right.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
exactly.
So now that made me think of something. Oh, I know what made me think of. So now we're when you mentioned McCain, I started to think about this real big movement towards all things plant-based. And again, I think it is definitely for a more affluent area of the community. But what is Pick n Pay's stance on that? What are you doing to promote that, if anything?
Yeah, so I mean, it's like the awareness around it is certainly growing. At the moment, it is the more affluent customer that is more aware of it, and it is a little bit more pricey than other lines sometimes. So we already have plant-based products, lots of them in the stores. And I think it's certain. I mean, I don't. It's not even a trend anymore. It's just something that's happening. That's growing, and we've been involved in interesting things recently. I mean, we partnered with Ubuntu Wellness, and they're running a pilot program to help people with diabetes too, where it gets reversed in 21 days. So people switching to a complete plant-based diet. And so the trial has been with some people in affluent areas as well as people staying in townships, and the results have been the same. So the next phase, just in plant-based, is certainly because I mean, younger people don't have any issues, I think, with it. It's the older people like me that is a bit like, where's my steak and force and all
Yeah.
that stuff. Is it healthy? I mean, it can't be healthy, is what you think, and it actually is much more healthy to do the shift to only plant-based.
Yeah.
The obviously not a quick win for businesses because it would take some. And there's my future plant-based diet son knocking on the door. Um, yes. Yeah, it'll take some time, because I mean people are used to the way we eat. We like our sugar, we like our specific way of having our diets. But certainly, I mean, it's a very important area for the business to focus on. Also, in terms of, I mean, what is challenging still is getting some of the products locally sourced. So overseas, there's many lines available. Some of them, amazing lines. But our focus is very much also in terms of supporting local trade and local innovation.
That's our whole sustainability.
So that's something that, yeah, just and also makes financial sense. It's cheaper if we don't need to import something and we're able to produce it here eventually. So there's some work happening there in terms of plant-based as well to
Local.
up that area of small business development so that there's more focus on empowering people to create amazing plant-based products for South Africa by South Africans.
I love that. I love the Pick Local whole initiative. I think it's great. So I think in kind of conclusion, if we link all of the sustainability, the food waste, the packaging, the plant-based, or whatever it is within the food retail arena, Dentsu being a communications company, I want to try and bring all of these sort of food sustainability issues back to that. How do you communicate this to your customers? All these different initiatives. I mean, is it a rah thing for you? Are you hiding away? You're just telling people like me? What's the deal?
So the whole communication space is interesting. I mean, what COVID is, I mean, just generally in terms of sustainability, what COVID has done is terrible to the world, but it's also really wonderful. It's certainly waking people up to all the environmental, social, and governance issues. So I think many retailers have seen that, especially from investors and rating companies, that has always sort of been aware of sustainability. You might get one question that suddenly jumped to, completely top of mind, and that's what most of them are asking us now. At our AGM a few months ago, all the questions were environmental, social, and governance.
Wow.
No one asked no one asked any financial questions, which is a big sign a shift is happening. And I think I mean, if we take it back to consumers before we get the comms to them, and it's happening slowly, as people move past COVID, is suddenly this awareness of where your food comes from or where things come from. So we were all worried, where does this virus come from? And now people are thinking, but where does my food come from? So also from the consumer side, I mean, we're seeing more queries in terms of just simply that, where does my food come from? Who made it? Is it safe? Were people ethically supported when they were making the food? All those things like ethical audits, ethical supply chains becoming very important across all the income groups. It might be because you're in such a supply chain working there in a factory that it's important for you, or you're someone, buying some nice product and you want to know someone, no child labor was used made for it. So our comms generally has been, it's one of partnerships. I mean, that's the sort of ethos of Pick n Pay. It's always working in partnerships with other organizations, with our customers. We're also we're one of the founding members of the Sustainable Retailer Forum. So we actually work with all the other retailers, all of them in South Africa, part of the Sustainable Retailer Forum. The food retailers, as well as some of the clothing retailers, are all part of starting to work together. Specifically to Pick n Pay, our comms is split. I mean, there's the externally facing one is called People and Planet, where we communicate this work. And then internally, where a huge amount of work is happening is because people within the business get empowered if they know this. It's through all the channels that we've got. So it might be the our staff communication newspaper, the in-store channels like in-store radio, the in-store televisions, whichever way we can. I mean, there's the staff app, Wuzu, there's a newsletter that goes to suppliers. All of them is increasing the amount of content around sustainability, not only on food waste, but I mean, that does get featured often because we're dependent on the stores to be able to achieve changes on that. But it's not a rah-rah, it's a let's do this together rather.
Well, I mean, I think you started off this interview by saying if you use less, you have more to give. And I think that if I take anything away from that, I think that is a beautiful, beautiful, just a guiding light of why it's a very, very bloody good reason to reduce packaging, food waste, and punt sustainability. So well done on your journey, Andre. Thank you very, very much for sharing Pick n Pay story with us.
Great, no, it was a pleasure.